On a cold November morning in 2022, the quiet college town of Moscow, Idaho woke up to a nightmare. Four bright young university students were found brutally murdered in their off campus residence. What led to this horrific tragedy? Who could commit such a heinous crime and why? This story isn't just about a murder, it's about the lives tragically cut short and the relentless pursuit of justice in one of the most chilling cases of 2022. Today, we unravel the mystery of the University of Idaho murders, a case that shocked the nation and left everyone asking what really happened that night. Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were all vibrant, young students full of dreams and promise. Kaylee and Madison were best friends since childhood, inseparable even in death. Xana, a junior studying marketing, was known for her lively personality. Ethan, a freshman, was Xana's boyfriend and a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity. Together, they represented the spirit of youth and ambition. In the early morning of November 13th, 2022, four University of Idaho college students were stabbed to death in a shared rental home close to campus. Two female victims, Madison Mogen and Xana Kernodle, lived in the house. They worked at the same local restaurant. The third, Kaylee Goncalves, had recently moved out of the house but returned to attend a nearby party. The fourth victim, Ethan Chapin, was Kernodle's boyfriend who was sleeping over on the night of the attacks. Two other female roommates also lived at the house. They were not attacked. The evening of November 12th, 2022 was like any other weekend for the students. Earlier on the evening of November 12th, two of the four victims, Chapin and Kernodle, were reportedly at an on-campus party at the nearby Sigma Chi fraternity from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. They returned home at 1:45 a.m. That evening, the other two victims, Mogen and Goncalves, had gone to the Corner Club, a downtown sports bar, at 10 p.m., from which they departed at 1:30 a.m. A live-streamed video on Twitch by the Grub Truck, a food truck 4 blocks south at Friendship Square Main and 4th Streets, showed Mogen and Goncalves at 1:41 a.m. chatting and smiling, getting their food 10 minutes later, and leaving to take what the police initially said was an Uber ride home, a trip of about 1 mile. According to the surviving roommates, the four students were home by 2 a.m. On November 13th, 2022, at around 11:58 a.m., a chilling 911 call was made from one of the surviving roommates' phones reporting an unconscious person. When the police arrived, they found a gruesome scene. The four students had been stabbed to death, seemingly in their sleep. There were no signs of forced entry, leading investigators to believe the killer knew the victims or had easy access to the home. The four victims were stabbed to death on the second and third floors in the residence, where they had been in bed. The victims were not gagged or restrained, and the walls at the scene were spattered with blood. Mogen and Goncalves were found in Mogen's bedroom, and Kernodle and Chapin were found in Kernodle's room. The two surviving roommates were on the property when police arrived, as were other friends of the victims. The police immediately launched an investigation, but the case proved challenging. The house was a known party spot with countless fingerprints and DNA samples to analyze. A key piece of evidence was a leather knife sheath left on one of the victims' beds. DNA from the sheath would later become a critical clue. The investigation of the stabbings was led by the Moscow Police Department, MPD, and supported by the Idaho State Police ISP and the Federal Bureau of Investigation FBI. Altogether, almost 130 members of law enforcement from the three agencies worked on the case. Autopsies on the four victims were performed in Spokane, Washington. The Latah County coroner stated the victims all appeared to have been stabbed multiple times with fatal wounds in the chest and upper body with a large knife, if not the same knife, very similar ones. At least one victim with what were apparently defensive stab wounds on her hands and possibly more appear to have tried to fend off their attacker, and the victims may have been attacked while sleeping in their beds. None showed signs of sexual assault. All four deaths were deemed homicide by stabbing. The victims were not tied and gagged. No weapon has been recovered, although the police believe the killer or killers used a fixed blade knife. A surviving roommate who reportedly saw the suspect described him as a male stranger around 5 feet 10 inches and not very muscular but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. On November 19th, Moscow police requested the public provide any video of the house that had been recorded the night of the killings. A phone tip line and email were created through the FBI for the public to submit information to officials. As of December 5th, 2,600 email tips, 2,700 phone calls, and 1,000 digital media submissions were reportedly submitted to these tip lines. On December 24th, investigators reported having received at least 15,000 tips regarding the case. The police initially left open the possibility of more than one perpetrator. Police stated that they believed it was a targeted attack but have not concluded if the target was the residence or its occupants, after receiving hundreds of tips from the public. On December 15th, police announced they were searching records of approximately 22,000 fifth-generation Hyundai Elantras made between 2011 and 2013. A camera in the area captured video of a white or light-colored Elantra around the time of the murders, which investigators noticed had made multiple passes along the same route near the residence. Another surveillance recording obtained by investigators also showed an Elantra passing by the victim's home 3 times beginning around 3:29 a.m. At 4:04 a.m., the Elantra returned to the home for a fourth time. At 4:20 a.m., the car was seen speeding away from the victim's neighborhood. Investigators in neighboring Pullman, Washington, a college town adjacent to Moscow, began an investigation into a white Elantra belonging to a 28-year-old PhD candidate and teaching assistant named Bryan Kohberger, who drove it with his father home to the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania for the holidays. Kohberger's Elantra was of a later year than the original police description. Kohberger was pulled over twice within a nearly 5-mile radius by Indiana State Police on Interstate 70 outside Greenfield, Indiana, allegedly for following too close or tailgating. The FBI denied allegations that they had directed the Indiana State Police to make the stops. Investigators obtained cell phone data that showed that Kohberger's phone stopped connecting to the network around 2:47 a.m. in Pullman on November 13th before reconnecting around 4:48 a.m. near Blaine, Idaho, which is near US Highway 95 south of Moscow. Cell phone data also shows that his phone utilized a cell tower near the victim's residence around 9 a.m. on November 13th, approximately 5 hours after the killings. Police also obtained data that indicated that his phone pinged from the cell phone tower nearest the residence at least 12 times between June 2022 and November 13th. Investigators obtained 3 unidentified male DNA samples from the crime scene, including DNA found on a tan leather knife sheath on Mogen's bed. According to the surviving roommates, the 4 students were home by 2 a.m. 7 unanswered phone calls were made from the phone of Goncalves to her former longtime boyfriend, a fellow student, from 2:26 to 2:52 a.m. and 3 unanswered calls were made from Mogen's phone to the same person from 2:44 to 2:52 a.m. These calls were investigated, with the police concluding they did not believe the recipient of those missed calls was involved in the crime. A DoorDash order labeled for Xana was delivered to the house around 4 a.m. Using a public genealogy database, authorities reportedly identified a partial match to an individual with a familial connection to Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger was an aspiring criminologist with a fascination for crime and law enforcement. He had a clean record but was described by peers as socially awkward and intense. His interest in criminal behavior now seemed more sinister in light of the murders. Investigators recovered trash from outside Kohberger's family's home in Pennsylvania for DNA, which they stated was consistent with being the source of the DNA from the sheath. Before the arrest, investigators monitored Kohberger outside of his parents' Pennsylvania home. He was allegedly seen multiple times wearing surgical gloves and observed putting trash bags inside of the garbage can of a neighbor. The items were sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing. Authorities also said Kohberger had cleaned his car inside and outside, not missing an inch of area. According to authorities, a search of the home where Kohberger was arrested revealed a knife, a pistol, and a black face mask, as well as ID cards inside a glove inside a box. Kohberger was taken into custody by an FBI SWAT team and Pennsylvania State Police on December 30th at the home of his parents in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. At the time of his arrest, authorities allegedly found Kohberger in the kitchen dressed in a shirt and shorts while wearing examination gloves and putting trash into separate Ziploc baggies. Kohberger was arrested on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 felony count of burglary, was appointed a public defender, and was detained without bond at the Monroe County Correctional Facility in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. On his return to the county courthouse on January 3, 2023, he agreed to extradition. On January 4th, he was flown to Pullman, driven to the Leta County Jail in Moscow, and held without bail. Kohberger made his first appearance in the Leta County Courthouse on January 5th and was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary for breaking into a home with the intent to commit a felony. 1 week later, on January 12th, Kohberger made his second appearance for a status conference in the same room at the courthouse. On June 26, the Leta County Prosecutor's Office announced they were seeking the death penalty given the alleged aggravating circumstances of the first-degree murder charges. Kohberger was denied bond. In January 2024, the judge granted the defense access under seal the results of the investigative genetic genealogy testing, which used a touch sample from the knife sheath left behind at the crime scene, which first led to the investigation of Kohberger. On September 9, 2024, the judge granted the defense's motion for a change of venue. The trial is scheduled to take place in Boise, Idaho, with Judge Stephen Hippler presiding over the case. On October 9, 2024, Judge Hippler set the start date for jury selection as July 30, 2025, with the jury trial beginning on August 11, 2025. On February 24, 2023, University of Idaho President C. Scott Green announced that the house where the killings occurred was donated to the university. It was demolished 10 months later on December 28. A memorial garden for the victims on the University of Idaho campus is being planned. Scholarships in the name of 3 of the victims, Kernodle, Chapin, and Mogen, have been created. The university awarded posthumous degrees to the 4 victims at its spring commencement ceremonies on May 13, 2023. Although Kohberger has not confessed, experts speculate he might have been driven by a desire to commit the perfect crime influenced by his academic interest in criminology. His alleged stalking of the victims suggests premeditation, and the brutal manner of the murders indicates a deeply disturbed individual. What drives someone to commit such a heinous act? Could the victims have been saved if the killer's behavior had been flagged earlier? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights matter. The University of Idaho murders remind us of the fragility of life and the darkness that can hide behind seemingly ordinary lives. While the case has shaken the nation, it also highlights the tireless efforts of law enforcement in pursuing justice. Stay tuned for more real-life crime stories, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping content.